Ooh, ooh. I'm going to Salem. Seekest thou the road to all that's foul and fair? Gather, sisters, fire, water, earth, and air. Darkest hour, wake thy power, earthly and divine. Burn and brew with coven true, and glory shall be thine. Down, down, down the road, down the witch's road. Down, down, down the road, down the witch's road. Follow me, my friend, to glory at the end. My Airbnb was in Marblehead, a really cute little seaside town. I went to dinner at the Sail Loft with my brother and his wife, and then we found a really beautiful place to look out over the water. It was a perfect way to start the trip, really centering and peaceful, and full of love and Aurora searching for shenanigans, along with the little green light that made me think of Gatsby. And as we walked home, we got to see the castle with a single light on, and it was rather spooky and perfectly atmospheric. That night, I did a tarot pull to try and center me for the day, and one, of course, jumped out. It was the Page of Pentacles, all about focusing up and making your magic happen. Determined to do so, I said goodnight. Fortified by the highly appropriate coffee selection we had at the Airbnb, and a floor breakfast while getting myself in the mood by reading The Daughters of Temperance Hobbes, I ventured forth into my first day in Salem. While very excited by the signs of magic and mystery that I already saw, I knew that I had to make one stop first. This is the memorial of those who died in the witch trials. The threshold is covered by their last words, their pleas, and their entreaties that even if they must die, that their neighbors be spared and that this horror would end. I felt it only right to visit this place and pay my respects, and acknowledge the fear and terror and tragedy that doesn't feel so far off from what we're dealing with now. Samuel Wardwell, Margaret Scott, Wilmot Red, Anne Pudditor, Mary Parker, Alice Parker, Mary Esty, Martha Corey, Giles Corey, John Willard. And I found it fascinating and powerful that this part of the wall was taken down so that the people who accused them, who are buried here, can see this. John Proctor, George Jacobs, Martha Carrier, George Burroughs, Sarah Wilds, Rebecca Nurse, Susanna Martin, Elizabeth Howe, Sarah Good, Bridget Bishop. And I found myself being really fascinated by this tree. The trees here are meant to represent the people that judged them. But I couldn't help thinking that something that looked this old might have been there and might have known these people at that time. I took a deep breath and then ventured forth to get some coffee at the Wolf Next Door coffee shop and sit out by the water. In order to get parking, I was here really early, so nothing was open, but yet again, the water was really peaceful and meditative. And I got to see this really old door, which was super cool. Then I started wandering back to the center of town, which was pretty deserted right now, either because it was a Monday, or because it was really early, or because it was raining. I had bought an umbrella, but I still felt like a wet cat, so I decided to have second breakfast at Red Sandwich Shop, which used to be the London Coffee House. Dripping sunny-side-up eggs and bacon, and cinnamon raisin toast and hot coffee, reading my book and listening to the waiters tease each other. Then went for my first event, the House at the Seven Gables tour. We weren't able to film inside, but I was brave enough to go up the secret passage, which was terrifying. It was a really cool mix of historical accuracy and literary license. I especially loved this secret liquor cabinet and the beautiful gardens in the back. Then lunch at the New England Soup Factory with clam chowder and a warm piece of bread. And then my first bit of shopping at the Black Veil. And Witch City Wicks, where I found an oracle deck I had been wanting. Wicked Good Books, where I found a present for the bean. And then Oak and Moss, where I found a Green Witch Garden book. And then finally to Haus Witch. I heard about their shop from the Witch Wave podcast and knew that I had to take a trip to Salem sometime. They had these really cool boxes of spells with all the equipment you need. And then I got my aura read. The blue and indigo represents reflection, and the green on the right is a burst of energy and action, which seems appropriate for this trip. After that, I went to Conjuring the Spirit World, Art, Magic, and Mediums, an exhibit at the Peabody, Essex Museum. It was full of different representations of people trying to reach the spirit world at the turn of the century, the fin de siècle, when new technologies and a reach back to simpler times, plus the tragedy of the war, made anything seem possible and had people reaching out to their loved ones who had passed on. And also had many illusionists who were taking advantage of that kind of thinking. They had photographs of spirits, art representing different spiritual ideas, the history of spiritualist communities that cropped up around this time, and lots of famous mediums and illusionists, including Black Herman, who I had heard about before. I think my favorite part of the exhibit was all the different machines that people have used to try and reach out to the spirits with remarkably specific questions. This is the spirit clock, and this is the spirit bell. One cool juxtaposition was Arthur Conan Doyle's collection of spiritualist artifacts versus Houdini's spiritualist debunking. I then went to a few more exhibits around the PEM, including one about the Salem witch trials, which had a few artifacts from the time, And then an exhibit about Moby Dick book art, which included some really cool pop-up books and one with a whale eye coming out. At last I saw an exhibit about the sea, which had some beautiful paintings and pieces of ships. And I was highly disappointed that this cabinet was not really from a shipwreck, but a piece of art. I then got excellent pizza and an Agatha All Along cocktail at Flying Saucer, and it was fantastic. As I was sitting there, Big was playing on the screen above the bar, and then in the very next shop I went into, Emporium 32, which had wonderful knickknacks, there was, surprisingly, a Zoltar machine, which felt very serendipitous.
Age is simply a matter of mind. If you don't mind, then my friend, it doesn't matter.
Of course, I had to get a fortune. I then swung by City Hall, where my favorite scene in Hocus Pocus takes place, and then fell into bed exhausted, because that was just day one, y'all. The next day, I pulled the King of Cups, which is all about being calm and friendly, and was so grateful that it wasn't raining today, and it was beautiful and sunny. I went to Odd Meter Coffee and got a pumpkin pie latte and started walking. I ended up on Salem Common, sipping my coffee and people watching, and communing with yet another very large and very old tree. I then went to Artemnesia Botanicals, which was one of my favorite shops of the trip. They are run by real witches who make their own stuff, and they have hundreds and hundreds of jars of herbs. I went through and purchased some of my favorites to make a tea for that particular evening. I was supposed to have my first mediumship reading at Ascend, but unfortunately they booked me for a tarot reading instead, which was a bit disappointing. Luckily, then I went to Direwolf Tavern, which had one of my favorite meals of the trip, a glass of white wine and some pumpkin ravioli, which was sweet and salty and crunchy and just perfect and hit the spot. I then went to what became another one of my favorite shops, Hive and Forge, which was a bunch of different artisans all sharing the same shop and really making beautiful and unique crafts and objects. I then ventured out of Salem into Salem Woods to go on a forest lore tour with the Mushroom Witch. We wandered through Salem Forest, and she told us all about the plants that grow there and their medicinal properties, and just had a grand old time tromping through the woods.
The turkey tail mushrooms are cool for a number of reasons. The first one is that depending on the type of tree that they grow in, it determines the colors that they are. So when these were fresh, they were blue, gray, and they had a stripe of brown on them. They're kind of hard to tell because there's some moss growing on them. But I've seen them also colors orange, green, varying shades of brown as well, tan. Really colorful.
I also tried rose hips for the first time, which were a little bitter. That night, I made the tea that I had gotten at Artemnesia Botanicals. And I wanted to light a candle, but I didn't have matches, and turns out it would have been a fire hazard for the Airbnb. But then I wanted to make this witch that I had in my head. Weirdly, I picture her, and whenever I'm having an anxiety attack, I can see her in my head, and she's this kind of Baba Yaga figure with a broom that starts dusting around my brain and saying, "Look at the state of this place." And it really kind of helps me with my anxiety. She kind of feels like the crone to me, grandmother witch, so I wanted to make a little statue of her to kind of honor her and use her to meditate sometimes when I'm having a hard time and need a little kick in the pants. This was my first time really working with clay since high school, so she ended up looking a little bit like a frog, but I will possibly try and do her again a little bit later, but I like her right now. I left the stick there so that she would dry and I could insert a little broom that I made there, just so that she can have a broom to sweep out my cobwebs when needed. On my last full day in Salem, I walked down to the wharf, got coffee at Jaho Coffee, a really amazing Harvest Moon mocha, and saw some interesting signs. And then I walked down to the edge of the pier and sat by the water. And honestly, these moments at the water were some of the most meditative and wonderful of my trip. I sat there and just felt the sun on me and the breeze on the rock underneath me, and I finally kind of understood that thing that witches do of tapping into the elements. Like, originally I was thinking it was like, oh, I'm gathering little pieces of these things here and there, but it's less that and more just tapping into something that's larger than myself. I'm sitting there and feeling the water and looking at it and trying to take that into me and learn from it. And feeling the breeze in the air and trying to take that into me and learn from it. And then I look at the sun and feel its warmth and fire and try and take that into me and learn from it. And the rock beneath me, feeling it, taking that into me and learning from it. So nervous about people watching me talk to myself. There's a bunch of people around. Casual. So casual. I think they're waiting for the porta potties. It's awkward. Hi, y'all. I hope you can hear me. There's a lot of like construction and wind and waves and things. I haven't really talked about why I'm here. So I've been wanting to go to Salem for a long time. It's been on my bucket list. I've always been connected to magic, like the idea of magic. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, that quote, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. It just makes sense. Like, we keep discovering new things in science, and like, there are things that we can't experience with our senses, and so the hidden, the unseen world, whatever that means, seems legit to me. So I grew up Catholic. Still have a lot of that in my DNA, and it was like very liberal, wonderful, social justice-y Catholic. My church, St. Vincent de Paul in Baltimore, was a really great place for me growing up. But I had a hard time connecting with the stories in a lot of ways. And so my parents read to me The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Oh, Salem's waking up. So my parents read to me Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I was really able to kind of connect that way. The metaphor always really helped me. And then as I grew older, the difficulties and rigidity of not necessarily my home church, but of the Catholic Church as a whole, was really hard for me. And so I had a hard time kind of connecting with a lot of the wonderful things as well, because there was this barrier of, oh, but it's tainted by so many horrible things. And I really wanted a way to like reconnect with my spirituality in a way that didn't have all the baggage. Well, it has its own baggage, I know, but didn't have the baggage that was kind of most damaging to me. I'm a ghost now. I'm gonna try and move. It's like, hey, I'm trying to ban my soul over here. Where was I? Yeah, so I wanted a way to connect with my spirituality that wasn't kind of also colored by... I'm not saying that this is every church. I'm not saying that this was my church. But kind of the feeling that some Catholicism can have of like, you must cut off every piece of yourself and sacrifice yourself for other people. Like, if you are not enjoying yourself, then that's good. If you don't listen to yourself, for the love of God. I do realize the irony of that statement. Okay. If you don't listen to yourself, listen to an external authority figure. There is a right way and a wrong way to do things. And if you don't kind of abase yourself before the people who are hurting you and like work to gain their forgiveness or to like you again, then you are a bad person because you don't make that effort. You're not trying hard enough. I feel like that's a big thing. And like, there are so many other wonderful messages in Christianity, like love your neighbor as yourself. You are beautifully and wonderfully made. God will be there to walk with you through the darkness. Like, all these wonderful, wonderful things. But I had to kind of disentangle those things from the negative messages. So I wanted to get kind of back down to basics. So I was like, what is more basic than the seasons? I'm just going to dig into the seasons and figure out what they mean. And create kind of my own little rituals around them. And with that, this is just where we are today. New England construction people. Doing their thing. It seems like they're gonna stand there and chat for a while, so I'll get back to you. Then I went to the Witchery for an event I was really excited about. Broom Making class. We got to choose all of our different materials. And then we were instructed how to make a broom.
Anybody else want me to check? You good?
I think so.
But yeah.
Oh,
Double
nope.
check.
Can you double check?
Yeah, sure. That is good. If you pull real hard, you will be able to pull it out. That's okay.
I was pretty proud of mine. And now I know how to make brooms. The shops around the wharf were some of my favorites. They had their own particular vibes, which I really appreciated. Especially Circle of Stitches, which is a witchy, crafty place, which is exactly my vibe. On the way back, I stopped into L'Appel du Vide, and I got a really charming present for Matthias. This little skeleton, who he now calls Mr. Skelly. I then went on a tour of Salem, apparently the only tour done by a real witch. We started out in the Enchanted garden, which was a lot of fun, and we did a ritual around a table where we burnt bay leaves and we set intentions for our time. We learned both about history and modern witchcraft, and we stopped at the memorial and said all the dead's names as a prayer.
So, it's not about manipulation, but it's more about connection to the natural forces of the universe.
One of my last stops in Salem was the Athenaeum, where they had an Enchanted Lands exhibit of classic fantasy books. They had this incredible Alice in Wonderland chess set, some beautiful books about Oz, The Little Prince, Hobbit and Winnie the Pooh, Chronicles of Narnia. And it just turned out to be a beautiful hidden gem here in Salem, so check it out if you ever go. I ended the night at Far From the Tree Cider House, where they had a flight of ciders based on Hocus Pocus. They were all pretty unique and tasty. Then I trudged home to finish the conversation we were having this morning. Oh, I was definitely low on energy and brain cells.
Hey everybody. So to close the loop on our conversation this morning, I started really trying to connect with like the seasons and nature and things like that, just to get back to basics. And I forget how, but this idea came into my head. I don't know if it was because I read something in a book or what. The idea that the universe loves you and wants you to be happy. And that was something that really kind of struck me. Of like, what would it be to live in a universe that wanted us to have everything that we needed to survive and was kind and loving and giving and just waiting for us to like tune in. And that summer I was looking at my garden and I was getting more cucumbers and zucchini than I knew what to do with. And I was like, oh gosh, like this is free. This comes out of the ground for free for us. It was just like a really profound moment of like, oh yeah, if we listen to the universe is saying, here are all the things that you need to live. And of course, modern society has put a lot of kind of artificial barriers in the way of that. But it's still there if we pay attention to it. And so the idea of a loving universe really resonated with me, this particular way of looking at it. And in the meantime, I'm also doing a lot of therapy, a lot of breath work, a lot of reading. And I read the Discworld books, specifically the Witches one, and realizing that a lot of magic is just psychology, or as Granny Weatherwax calls it, headology, or breathwork, or meditation. It's you putting your energies in the right direction to get you either what you want or where you need to be, and helping you to pay attention to the universe when the universe is trying to tell you things. Like, here is a zucchini for free. And so I came to Salem to kind of connect with my history in that way. I didn't really come to Salem for, like, the Salem witch trials history. Like, that is really sad, and it's a tragic event. But I really liked how I heard that Salem had started to be kind of reclaimed by witches. And yes, the people who were hanged for being witches were not witches necessarily, but I like the fact that in a place where people were persecuted for being different, or just persecuted because they had land, the misfits and the strange folk are kind of reclaiming it. Like, nature is healing. And so I came here in search of not like Halloweeniness. So I didn't really go to any of the wax museums or things like that. I came in search of witches, grounded practicing witches here in Salem. And I was surprised by the spectrum. I guess I wasn't surprised by the spectrum of shops. We have things all the way from like the most touristy things, or like t-shirts with a witch on it that says, "Don't talk to my mother that way." And then there's like a bunch of hot topic-y stores and a bunch of like, oh, you can get this witch stuff anywhere kind of witch stores. But the ones that I really gravitated towards were the ones that were just like, we made this. Here it is. Like Artemnesia Botanicals, Haus Witch. Places where witchcraft is really a craft, and that you couldn't get these things anywhere else. That's not to say that I didn't also buy some really cute shit. But yeah, I was really glad to find some of those really grounded, craft-focused witchcraft places. I came here to kind of connect with my history. In a way, I wanted to talk, since it's getting to be Samhain, I wanted to see if I could talk to my ancestors or connect with my ancestors to, like, not jump over, but reach back into the past beyond Catholicism and known things. And I wanted to see if there was anybody like me in my family tree. And I didn't get an opportunity to do that, but I did get some advice at one of my readings that was, don't look to the past, look within. And I kind of had that experience today, so I guess the moral of the story is the witch's road is the road you had inside you the whole time. Yeah.
I have learned the lesson of all that's foul and fair. Our love was forged in fire, water, earth, and air. The spell is cast, how long it lasts, I cannot divine. The road is there, and so I dare to risk this heart of mine. As we go down, down, down the road, down the witch's road. Down, down, down the road, down the witch's road. While I stayed in Marblehead, I kept saying, oh, I'm gonna go visit the water. But I never did. And then I was driving home and it just kept being there, so I figured I would stop and just sit. And again, feel the air and the warmth of the sun, and see the water and feel the earth. And know that the witch's road is inside me, and the only way out is through. As I was sitting on the beach, I saw a lady, an older lady, with long gray hair in a ponytail, walking her dog on the beautiful shore. And I had a moment of like, that is what I want. It reminds me of Miss Rumphius, where once you're finished traveling far away and making a difference in the world, you retire by the seaside. And I hope that that's my future. Follow me, my friend. I'll see you at the end.